This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of
Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Hamden, North Haven annual breakfast with the legislators. And we usually have 7 legislators, and the bug got 3 of them. Yes. So we'll be missing Senator Fasano, Representative Iacarino, and this morning he just called in Josh Elliott. So he's down too. However, so therefore, in order for all of you to have breakfast with a legislator, we'll ask the legislators, after they've had their breakfast, to move from table to table and then sit down with you and just interact. And we have till about 9:45, and there is going to be a topic, a general topic. And the general topic is, I love or I like Connecticut because. So think about what you like about Connecticut and ask your legislator what they like about Connecticut. And there's one thing that you may not say. You may not say, I like Connecticut because of this, but. You cannot say but. You can say, I like Connecticut, and I would like this to be changed this way or this to be improved. And for example, I'll give you an example. I love Connecticut because of the trees. And I would love for all of the trees that have been cut down from here to Hartford to be replanted. So that is the idea. So I love or I like Connecticut because, and then do an and whoever starts it at the table and ask all of the legislators, remind each other, no buts, okay? So please start. We're still waiting for Senator Logan, but everybody please start. And at about 9:45, we will start the panel discussion. So go ahead and start talking about you love Connecticut because. And always do get your refill of coffee.
So you can act, this is my bill that requires DOT to replant trees on the highways.
Okay, all right, I just got something. There apparently is a bill proposal to require disclosure of certain information prior to the removal of trees along limited access highways, and also to start replanting. Yay!
1308, contact the environment.
So go ahead and start talking. Some of you may have noticed that the light is on the stage, which means that we're going to be asking our legislators to get up on the stage. And we'll start the second part of our program. That's where your questions come in. So again, if you have a question, write it legibly and raise your hand and somebody will pick it up and bring it to the reviewers. Because there are 2 reviewers on the left-hand side of me, and they are reviewing the questions for duplications, for legibility, and sometimes for putting 2 questions together if they're of a similar nature. So dear legislators, we'll have to call them, I think, by name. They're so involved. Okay. So Senator Looney, would you please start towards the stage? Senator Logan, would you please start toward the stage? Representative D'Agostino, yes, would you please start toward the stage? Representative Porter, would you please follow all of those gentlemen onto the stage? And that is, I think, all five of them, because, no, how many is that now? That is 4. Like I said, we had 3. The bug got 3 of our legislators. So we'll do with 4. That's fine. It is wonderful to have this annual gathering because it is not a debate where the candidates have to
Morning, how are you? Good to see you.
have to sort of think of what they're saying and how they're saying it. This is a different thing. We have elected these people to manage our affairs in Hartford. And so we can ask how they're going to be doing it. We can also suggest to them how they could be doing it better. So let me see if all of them are here already.
Don't start with them.
Okay, one straggler here. Just a short word about the League of Women Voters. Many of you know what we're all about, and some of you don't. So for those of you who don't, the League of Women Voters was established in 1920 on February 14th, which was Valentine's Day. The idea was that women didn't have the vote yet, but those who were working for voting for women knew that when women got the vote, they wouldn't know what to do with it. They would say, honey, whom would you like me to vote for? So the people who really thought that all persons should be able to vote thought that all persons should also be capable of voting in an informed manner. And that was what the League was all about, to educate the members of the League themselves about how democracy functions, and also to educate, inform the community in which they live, and sort of attract more people to become informed voters. And so it was founded half a year before women did get the vote. And the League was so successful that did all kinds of major things, including starting the presidential debates. The League established the 4 years of presidential debates and monitored, and led them for a number of years until the political pressure got too much for them, and they said, "Oh, we're out of here. This is not the way how we do things," because the League is made up of people of all parties, Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, any of the other parties, and they come together, and so they have to be civil to each other, and so they learn, they expand their understanding of what's going on, and that is in itself extremely valuable. Men wanted to do the kind of work that the women were doing, so they said, "Hey, we want to join the League." So the women said, okay. And then in 1974, they said, "Okay, men, you can join the League." So since 1974, men have been members of the League, and we have members in the League of Women Voters of Hamden, North Haven, and including among them is the president of a town council and a mayor and all kinds of commission members and all kinds of people, very interesting people. And it's a valuable thing. And anybody can, of course, join and be civil to each other when they do join. Now, Let me start with the first question. And as you know, the questions, you have written the questions, they have come to the reviewers, and I get the questions from the reviewers. So here's one question. Connecticut is one of 13 states that has no in-person early voting and restrictions on absentee voting. Early voting and more flexible absentee voting would help a lot of people cast a vote. But language in the Connecticut State Constitution prevents our state from establishing early voting and no excuse absentee voting. The Secretary of the State is promoting a state constitutional amendment to remove this restrictive language. Would you support such a constitutional amendment? And here, maybe it's a yes or no vote would be possible. Let me start with Representative D'Agostino.
Yes.
Okay. Senator Porter. Senator Logan.
Well, I certainly don't never vote on a bill simply on the title. I'd have to look to see what exactly would be the details of an early voting
Would you
proposal.
speak into the mic,
Sure.
please?
I'd have to look at the detail of an early voting bill. For example, would it allow folks to vote 3 days before an election, or 3 weeks, or 3 months before? Details in terms of if someone were to vote early, could they change their vote if they change their mind? If so, how many times? So my ears are certainly open to that on a theoretical basis, but on the practical basis, I'd have to look at the details for that before I can
Thank
say
you.
yes.
Senator Looney.
Thank you. One thing, of course, there will not be details in the bill. In fact, it's not a bill. It's a proposed constitutional amendment that would then allow the legislature then to take action after the fact, should that constitutional amendment pass, to adopt early voting and to adopt changes in our absentee ballot laws. Because unlike most states, our absentee ballot and voting provisions are in our Constitution rather than a matter of statute. So what we will be voting on is whether or not the General Assembly should be allowed to make those changes, rather than the details that Senator Logan cited would come later, really. And it's important to know that there has already been an opportunity to do this, and the people of Connecticut rejected it in 2014. There was a question on the ballot to amend the Constitution to allow the General Assembly to take action in this regard. The question did not pass.
Thank you.
And we're proposing it again. I support doing it again, and I do support early voting and more flexible absentee ballot voting.
Thank you very much. Representative Porter.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. The Citizen Selection Program provides public funding for running election campaigns for state offices and the same amount of funding for incumbents and for challengers, making it possible for young candidates to compete. Would you have been able to compete without CEP? The ones who are here? This is not the question, I'm just...
No, I would not have.
Okay. All right. Yet,
I would have and did for many years before it was passed.
all right, so, yeah, but which was passed in 2005. Okay. Yet there is an undertow that is trying to drag this program under. How could a citizen selection program be defended and the nonpartisan State Elections Commission, Enforcement Commission, which administers it, and also handled all complaints about finance matters in the state? As you know, the commission that's the State Election Enforcement Commission, SEEC, has been cut again and again. And now it is mandated to finish even the most complex cases within a calendar year. So, comes the question. So how would you assure us that we will not lose CEP and that the commission will have sufficient resources to be a vigilant watchdog over elections in our state. Let us start with Representative Porter this time.
Unfortunately, I don't think that we can ensure that it does not happen, but I can assure you that I will fight to make sure that that doesn't happen. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we do continue to cut the funding, which disables them to do the job the way they need to do it. So I think the goal should be to make sure that, you know, the money is there and that they are properly funded so that they can properly navigate through C when we have CEP. And if there are any things that need to be investigated, they need to have the funds to do that. You're cutting them off at the knees, you're starving them, and that's how you get to take them under. So the fight really is to maintain the funding and to make sure that they have the proper resources to do their job.
Okay. Just to clue in some people who do not know about the Citizen Selection Program, this is the public funding of state campaigns. It is, the money does not come from our taxes. The money comes from the sale of abandoned property in the state. So it's a good deal. Okay, Senator Looney.
I certainly support making sure that the State Elections Enforcement Commission has adequate resources to do its mission. But one thing to keep in mind, however, is that our program has been severely compromised, not by anything we've done at the legislature, but by the Citizens United decision, which now allows for an unlimited outside spending by outside political action committees that can swap the amount of money that's available for the candidates under our program. So for instance, in last year's election, in some state Senate races, there were several $100,000 spent against some candidates or in behalf of other candidates that dwarfs the amount of money that can be allocated through the Citizens Election Program. So for instance, in the state Senate races, candidates have to raise $15,000, then get a grant of about $96,000, so it has a total budget of about $111,000. Well, sometimes 3 times that was spent in outside money by groups that were nationally affiliated with ideological groups of one kind or another. So our program has been in many ways undermined by Citizens United. And until that decision is reversed, we will not have a true, pristine public financing system.
Senator Logan.
Yes, I am in favor of the Citizens Election Program. It would have been very difficult for me to run for the first time for any office back in 2016 without it. I do believe, though, that the state is going broke. So we certainly have to look at where we spend our resources. And I think in terms of increases in funding or decreases in funding, I think should be justified and could be warranted. For example, if instead of $111,000, if it's reduced by 10% because of necessity, I would certainly look at that. But I am not in favor of eliminating the program. I think the program is very, very important, and I would support its continued existence.
Thank you. Representative D'Agostino.
Yeah, I'm a veteran of the program. When I first ran, I used it, and I wouldn't have been able to run without it. I think I echo all the comments here. I wanted to add, most people may not know that the executive director of the State Elections Enforcement Commission is a Hamden native, Mike Brandy. He's a Hamden guy. He's been doing it for several years, and he bends all our ears up at the Capitol every year with respect to the underfunding and understaffing that he has. Frankly, the only way you could actually guarantee that funding flow, even though by statute that's where the money comes from, is to put it in a constitutional amendment similar to what we have done to try to protect transportation funding. That's the only way you could do it. If that's something that people wanted, that we could propose that, but that's the only way you could actually guarantee a funding stream, because year after year, the legislature can say, even though funds are dedicated here, we can move them there, and we do that, unfortunately.
Right. Thank you. You should know that at the moment, 87% of the legislators in our state legislature have used CEP money. So, I mean, they should be the ones who are looking to find ways to assure that everybody who runs for state offices should run on CEP money, so that they're not, because when they're using somebody else's money, they become they have to show their gratitude or whatever. Somebody else has a hook in them. When they're using public money, in a way they're clean. And we have to find a way, the people in our legislature have to find a way to defend themselves against the citizens in the United Money. I mean, there in the majority, those who were elected were in the majority. They used this public money, and it's to all of our benefit. So, and by the way, it's very interesting because the League is very supportive of CEP. But it's very interesting. In the last election, 100% of our elected officers had run on CEP. In the last election, the people who ran for governor did not, for example, and so that skewed all kinds of things. But I have heard many people say that everybody in Connecticut should be required to run on CEP money and not waste their time fundraising. So, thank you very much. Next question. After so many cuts to municipalities in the last budget year, how would you work to ensure that towns and cities are not harmed? Let's start with Senator Looney.
Well, thank you. Municipal aid, as every other category of in our state budget, has been under challenge because of our difficult fiscal circumstances the last several years. I have introduced a bill that is a proposal to realign our property tax system and our mechanism for funding municipalities to recognize that we have to allow municipalities to have more ways to raise money on the one hand, but also to recognize that we need to find some different ways to get revenue streams where they're needed most. So, for instance, I have a proposal that would do away with the municipal motor vehicle tax and instead would have that collected as a state tax at a rate of about 15 to 19 mils and then distributed back to municipalities on a need basis. Also, I think I have a proposal as well that would provide a $50,000 homestead exemption off the assessed value of property on 1 to 4 family owner-occupied residential homes. So if your house was worth $200,000 market value, the assessed value 70% of that, 140. The adjusted assessed value would be 90. If your house was worth $1 million, your assessment is 700,000, and with the property tax credit would be 650. So it would build in more progressive taxation under the property tax. In addition, I'm proposing that we have a 1 mil statewide property tax that would be collected at the state level, just a single mill, and then also distributed back to municipalities. And that would allow us to fund programs like the Payment in Lieu of Taxes program, which would be important to Hamden because of the tax-exempt property Hamden has through Quinnipiac University and other entities here, important to New Haven, important to others, so that would allow us to more fully fund the pilot program based upon the Payment in Lieu of Taxes program for tax-exempt state property and also for tax-exempt college and hospital property. So there are ways, I think, that people talk about state taxes, but in reality, when you break it down, the tax that people find the most burdensome is the municipal property tax, more than any tax that's enacted at the state level. In fact, the amount in the aggregate collected by municipal property taxes throughout the state exceeds the amount collected by the state income tax. Everyone thinks the state income tax is the biggest revenue generator in the state. It is not. It is the local property tax. And to make that more fair, more equitable, we need to find ways to change that system so it is not seen as a barrier to economic development and a barrier to people who want to live and own homes in Connecticut.
Thank you. Senator Logan, the question was how would you work to ensure that towns and cities are not harmed? How would you work to get to that point?
Right. So I think the best way to work towards ensuring that our municipalities are receiving the aid that they are expecting and required from the state is by improving the overall state economy. So many of the different proposals you hear are really a lot of shuffling the deck. But the end result is going to be each of us will be paying more taxes. Connecticut is becoming less and less affordable for more and more people. I think to continue to come up with proposals to increase taxes has been having a reverse effect, a negative effect on our economy. And as long as we continue to do that, Connecticut will continue to suffer in terms of the out-migration of companies leaving the state. people leaving the state of Connecticut. We have less people behind paying more taxes. I just don't believe that we can tax ourselves to prosperity here in Connecticut. So shuffling the deck and finding different ways to tax folks, I don't think is the way to go. We need to concentrate on making Connecticut's economy more vibrant. So we have more companies here, we have more people working, paying taxes, is the only way we're going to get out of this financial mess that we have.
Thank you. Representative D'Agostino.
You're so doom and gloom, George. So doom and gloom. Every time I see you, it's some good things going on in the state of Connecticut, actually. But anyway, with respect to the question, in terms of the work that we've been doing, and obviously support everything that Marty mentioned, the way to make sure that towns like Hamden get what they need is to make sure that the mechanisms for delivering that aid are antiseptic and are non-political. And by that I mean, and we started doing this with the education aid formula, meaning you take the politics out of it and you use factors to deliver the aid that are non-political. What is the town's wealth index? What does the student population look like? What's the poverty level? How many children in the town are on Husky, et cetera, et cetera. And using those metrics, that's how you deliver aid. And if you do that, towns with more need like Hamden, New Haven, East Hartford, Manchester, et cetera, will start to get the aid they need. The problem historically has been, and Marty can tell you this, for example, with the ECS formula, the problem historically has been that in order to get these aid formulas passed and deliver aid, every town gets a piece. So when we started doing the ECS formula, Greenwich got aid. Greenwich has a mill rate of 12. 12! That's insane that you pay more in taxes here in Hamden on a $400,000 house than $1 million house in Greenwich. It doesn't make any sense. So you have to take politics out of that. And we've actually, in terms of answering your question, we've started to do that. Last year, we reanimated the ECS formula to use exactly those metrics. And Hamden did see a bump. Unfortunately, the pie is only so big, so we couldn't deliver 100% of the aid that Hamden's getting, but we're scheduled to get another 10% increase in that this year, and then if we stick to the formula we passed, using those antiseptic metrics, non-political metrics, we will get more over time to a path of full funding over 10 years. We can do the same with municipal aid, and the ideas that Marty is just proposing, by the way, Senator Looney, are radical and deserve everybody's support.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Porter.
Well, this is the issue with going last. Everything has pretty much been said that I support, especially Senator Looney and Representative D'Agostino. And I think I agree. You know, I'm a little tired of the doom and gloom and, you know, what all is wrong with Connecticut. There's a lot of things right with Connecticut. And I echo that sentiment from the table that I sat at right here with these young individuals. And one of the students actually said, after what she liked best about Connecticut, what she wanted to see was more people not complaining about how bad Connecticut is.
All right,
So,
I think that
I just want to give you a shout out for that. And I think the only thing that I have left to add to what's been said by my colleagues is that it's not about increasing taxes, it's about equity in taxes, right? And it's about leveling the playing field. And it is about taking the politics out of this. We talk a lot about being bipartisan. Well, I think across the board, we need some practice in that area. And it's not about a D or a R, it's about what's best for the people in this state. And I think it's really unfortunate that the majority of the people in this state are suffering because of the lack of equity in education, not just in education funding, but in employment, in jobs, pay equity for women. I mean, I think these are the things that we need to look at because they are revenue drivers. The more money people make, the more disposable income they have. And we're talking about low-wage workers. And specifically. So when we address these issues, we drive the economy by actually giving people more money in their pockets so that they can spend in the communities in which they live to uplift small businesses, to uplift, you know, nonprofits, and to help to build the community and make it more productive and viable and less dependent on state aid. So I fully support the ECS. You know, and making sure that that formula is equitable and that the towns and cities that need the funding are getting the funding and that the towns that don't need it aren't getting it. And I think we have to be honest about that, and people need to understand that where there's a need, we should be trying to do our best to help those folks.
Thank you very much. Would you support entrusting Connecticut's redistricting system to an independent/nonpartisan commission? Arizona and California have gone that route. Voters in other states have supported such a nonpartisan redistricting system in ballot questions in the 2018 election. So would you support entrusting Connecticut's redistricting system to an independent, nonpartisan commission? And that probably will be a yes or no question. Mr. D'Agostino.
You know, I don't know enough about. I need to.
Okay, fine. He's going to inform himself about that. Great.
But you should ask Senator Luna, who I know has worked
Okay.
with this.
We'll keep him for last. How's that? Senator Logan, about the redistricting, should it be an independent, nonpartisan redistricting commission?
Sure. So I'm still relatively new to politics. Right, I'm in my second term here. And I've never went through a redistricting period. But you talk about a nonpartisan committee or commission. Practically speaking, I just don't see how you do that. So currently, I have to hear more about it. But if I had to make a decision right here, right now, the answer would be no, because I don't see how we would come up with this nonpartisan group that would be able to provide such an important facet of our state government here in Connecticut.
Thank you. Representative Porter.
I'd have to echo my colleague, Representative D'Agostino. I don't know enough about it, but if I had to answer the question, I would be a hopeful yes, that it would be truly nonpartisan.
Okay, so that leaves Senator Looney, who probably has heard this question before and has had time to bone up on it.
Well, not just bone up on it. I have been in the General Assembly through 4 redistricting cycles and was on the commission myself in 2011, the last time. And we are very different from many other states. We are not a state like many states like Texas and North Carolina and others, where whoever is in control of the General Assembly at the time when redistricting comes up can draw the lines. We have not a nonpartisan, but we do have a guarantee. We have a bipartisan system in Connecticut. We have 4 Democrats and 4 Republican legislators who serve on the commission, regardless of which party is in the majority at a given time. In the event of a tie or a gridlock, that 8-member commission has to pick a 9th member by mutual agreement to break any ties. I think that is a good system. I think it works well for us. I share actually one issue where I certainly agree with Senator Logan. Who is the bipartisan or nonpartisan commission? Who picks them? Who are they? Are they truly competent? And I think the system we have now in Connecticut works well. I think that the states that have an entirely partisan redistricting system should be required to change that, either to an outside commission or to a system like we have here. So I would endorse our current system. I think it has worked well. We have not seen in Connecticut the kind of gerrymandering that we have seen in states that have an entirely partisan process, that whoever wins the election in 2020 guarantees control of the redistricting process in 2021. That's not the case here, and it hasn't been. So this is not the kind of burning issue for Connecticut that it is in other states that have a truly partisan system where you really have partisan advantage being taken and the kind of nakedly political gerrymandering that we've seen in other states.
Thank you. Would you support requiring beverage distributors to increase the handling fee for retailers and redemption centers to 3.5 cents? The 5-cent deposit would stay the same, would not change. A handling fee increase in New York State resulted in more redemption centers, new jobs, and more use by consumers. We could expect additional jobs and convenience in Connecticut with the passage of an increased handling fee paid to retailers. Would you support it? Let's start with Senator Looney.
Yes, I would. I'd have to look at the particulars of it in terms of what the impact of it would be, but I think we need to do everything we can to encourage recycling. We also need, I think, to recognize that the processing and handling has a cost to it. We need to make sure that there are a number of that redemption centers are available in the state. I understand a number of them have closed down in recent years because they just find that the reimbursement is not adequate to meet their costs. So I certainly would support that.
Thank you, Robin Porter.
Yes, I would.
How about Mr. D'Agostino?
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Okay, and Senator Logan.
Yes, I would in concept, but I have to look at the details as well.
Okay.
But yes, I would.
Well, thank you. Can you explain the proposed car and property tax plan as recently reported in the New Haven Register? So, means you have to read the New Haven Register. Okay, let us start with Senator Logan.
Well, in all fairness, I do believe it's Senator Looney's plan there. I think you should probably start to explain it to folks, and I'm more than happy to comment.
Okay, well, let's start with Senator Looney and ask him to explain what the proposed car and property tax is, as was reported.
Yes, thank you, Senator Logan. Yes, it is an effort, and these are bills similar to ones I've introduced over the years. I want to generate a discussion on this subject this year because, as I said earlier, the property tax is the fundamental tax challenge that we have in Connecticut, more than any other tax that's levied by the state. The burden on the municipalities because they are in effect limited to two fundraising sources, currently the local property tax and whatever grants they get from the state. But the proposal that I've introduced would, again, as I said, create the $50,000 homestead exemption for 1 to 4 family owner-occupied properties, would repeal the motor vehicle tax as levied at the municipal level, as I said, and make that a state tax collected at somewhere between 15 and 19 mils, and with the funds being distributed back to fully fund the ECS formula and fully fund the pilot formulas under college and hospital and state property pilot. Also to enact, as I said, the 1 mil state real property tax, again, for purposes of fully funding formulas. So those would be the components. I also propose doing away with creating a $25,000 exemption for business personal property, the property that businesses pay on their office equipment and other things. That's a burdensome tax on small businesses. So there would be a $25,000 exemption that only businesses that had more than $25,000 in business personal property would need to pay that tax. So those are the components. And again, the redistribution would be to fully fund ECS, to fund pilots, so that municipalities that have more than 40% tax exempt property in their communities would get 65% reimbursement under the college and hospital and state property pilot. Communities like Hamden that have between 10 and 40% tax exempt property would get 50% reimbursement under pilot. Right now it's only in the low 30s. And then for those municipalities that have less than 10% tax exempt property, they would get 35% reimbursement under pilot. They would still get slightly more than they're getting now, but it would be a 3-tiered reimbursement structure based on the percentage of tax exempt property in the municipality.
Thank you. Senator Logan.
Sure, and I'll just focus on the car tax proposal, part of the proposal. So we've tried this before in terms of tinkering with the car tax at the state level, and particularly here in Hamden, it was, in my opinion, it was an utter disaster. So I certainly need to look at it more closely. But as I hear it now, I'm not particularly in favor of it, but I'm certainly need to do more research on that before I make a final decision.
Thank you. Mr. D'Agostino.
I think the real person we probably need to ask is our mayor, who's sitting there in the front row. But I think he's nodding approvingly. Obviously, I support what Senator Looney's proposing here. The idea is that when that money is distributed, look, obviously Hamden as an example, would lose its car tax revenue right under that proposal. And I don't know off the top of my head what that is, Kurt. But the idea, of course, is that the increase in ECS aid and municipal aid would more than make up for that for a town like Hamden. Other towns, and Robin touched on this, other towns would not see that switch. But the idea here is to use a system like that to more equalize what's going on with the property tax system in Connecticut. And frankly, I at the end of the day, I don't have a lot of sympathy for a lot of towns who have mill rates in the teens and have been able to keep their mill rates in the teens, by the way, or the low 20s, because of state aid, right? So the decision is then up to those towns who might see a reduction in state aid to decide whether or not to raise their mill rate. And that's something that they should be asked to do that they have not been asked to do because they've been subsidized over time. That's fair to me.
Thank you.
Oh, if I might just add one more thing, I forgot to add one component before Representative Porter speaks. Another component of the redistribution of aid would address the question of funding for special education, which is a problem in every community. So right now, a community has to spend 4.5 times its per pupil expenditure before it gets any reimbursement from the state. This proposal would have the state reimbursement start to kick in once a town has spent 2.5 times its per pupil grant or per pupil expenditure.
Thank you. Representative Porter.
Oh, absolutely, unequivocally. And I believe that we have learned from the mistakes that we've made in our efforts to do this prior. So I always say, you keep trying till you get it right. You don't stop attempting to correct what's wrong. And it reminds me of a story I heard at one of the tables around special education, Representative D'Agostino. There's a student who actually has mental health needs, and she was talking about how, she's fortunate to be able to have clinicians outside of the school that can help her, but she also needs that help in the school to bridge the gap in her learning experience. So I think that we need to look at meeting the needs and where the needs are. And if there's not a need there, then there should be no subsidy there. And that's the bottom line.
That's wonderful. I really like that, we keep doing something until we get it right, sort of paraphrasing a bit. Keep doing it until you get it right.
Practice makes perfect.
That's what they say. It's been said that Connecticut might go toward substituting group homes with foster families. These foster families may not be well supervised or available. What is the status of group homes for the disabled? Is this a state issue? I don't know. Senator Logan.
I'd have to look at the issue in more detail. I think we have a good system in terms of our group homes and our foster system as well. Certainly always looking at ways to improve on both, but I'd have to look at that issue more closely.
Mr. D'Agostino.
The question might be getting at the fact that I think this was last year or a year before where look, the state itself maintains a number of state-run facilities for disabled with highly trained state employees who can handle folks with severe disabilities. I mean, really severe. And there was a proposal at one point in time to move some of those residents out into private settings for cost-saving measures. Anytime you talk about privatization, you really have to weigh the cost savings with, of course, the services that are being delivered. And in that case, I believe we reversed that proposal that was coming from the governor's office, precisely because the level of expertise, the care that was needed, the professionalism that was provided by the workers that we had, who were state employees who get this is a whole different conversation. People don't realize that state employees cover a wide range of services, and in this case, they were highly skilled. And the question was whether or not the privatization would deliver the same level of services. We determined it would not, and therefore didn't support that. So anytime you're talking about that kind of decision making, it cannot just be a cost-saving analysis. You have to look at the services that are being delivered, and we're doing that. And that's not to say we don't move to privatization. We have on a number of other different types of services. But anytime you do it, to me, you have to look at it with a little bit of a jaundiced eye to make sure that it's not just being done solely for cost savings.
Okay. Representative Porter.
And that was exactly what I was thinking about, Representative D'Agostino, because we did have several issues around group homes that were state-run, and the talk of privatization, and it actually happened in some instances, and I got several calls. And I remember on a few occasions that it was a compromise in the service. It was a disruption to the patients, and we're talking about very high-need patients. Some of them couldn't speak, they weren't mobile, they had become accustomed to the people that were helping them, their providers, and the clinicians, and people helping them with the rehab. And then this disruption of bringing in private contractors who were getting paid minimum wage, who had no experience, was detrimental to their health. And in some instances, some people lost their lives. So, I say, yes, we have to look at cost savings and we have to be careful with spending, but you can't put a price on a life. So.
Thank you, Senator Senator Looney.
Thank you. I think that Representative D'Agostino covered this. The issue on this question is the debate between the services going to be provided in state-run group homes or in private-run group homes. And there had been a proposal in the Malloy administration to convert more of the state homes to private homes. And the issue often is, as Representative Porter said and Representative D'Agostino, quality of care, professionalism of the staff. It is true that the state employees in the state-run group homes are generally more professionally credentialed and better compensated than the ones who are working in the private group home. So that continues to be a matter of debate. Are we going to convert the system through privatization, or are we going to maintain the dual system that we currently have?
Thank you. Connecticut public school systems had an excellent reputation in the past. The current model of town-run school systems is not economically sustainable. What legislation is being considered to support other school system models and/or improvements to Connecticut public schools? Let's start with Senator Looney.
But with all due respect, I would like to have Representative D'Agostino start on this one, because he is an acknowledged state education expert and former member and chair of the Hamden Board of Ed. So I would defer to him to begin on this. Mike?
I'll take it.
All right.
Yeah, I've more
Take it
years as a
away.
Board of Ed member in Hamden than as a state representative still, so I still think of myself that way. Well, first of all, I disagree with the first part of the question, the past tense of it. We've got our students here. I'll put our public education system in Connecticut up against the 50 states any day, and if you do that metrically, we still are at or near the top. We clearly have an achievement gap. That is because really our high achieving students achieve very high, but even our low achieving students, when you compare them to the rest of the country, are still better than, frankly, the entire South. No offense. But so I disagree with the first part of the question. But in terms of what we're doing to improve it, I think what the question might also be getting at is just sort of, does the model of 169 school districts work? It doesn't. It does not, for a number of reasons. Certainly, just from an efficiency standpoint, it doesn't make sense to have 169 superintendents, particularly when you've got some school districts, I'm not making this up, with graduating high school classes in the teens. That's a private school. And the state is subsidizing that. That cannot continue. Larger question, obviously, with respect to how you get people to change that, because nobody wants to give up local control. I get that. But right now, in the legislature, there are proposals out there to require consolidation if your school district is below a certain size. Require it. We've got to put a stick to this rather than just incentives at the state level. You've got to require towns in the northeast part of town, and my dad was a superintendent up there, by the way, Killingly, Danielson, Scotland, etc., to combine their services. So that's in the hopper right now, and I hope people will support that. The other way to do this is, Marty touched on it, special ed. There's a great opportunity to effectively regionalize or consolidate our special ed services, both in terms of the funding that's provided, because right now the state sends out a whole bunch of funding to different towns, and the towns have to supplement that because they're not getting the full amount, as Marty mentioned. What you can do is centralize that funding and really create almost like an insurance type system where each town says, you say to each town, here's how much you're going to pay in at the start of the year. And rather than have to worry about cost overruns when a child comes in who has significant need, we effectively insure against that at the state. It's like you're paying a premium, so you know what your cost is going forward, and the state reinsures against that and covers that additional cost over time, over the course of the school year. And then your premium might go up next year, but at least it's predictable. The problem we always had in Hamden and other towns with special ed costs is you start the year at X and you end the year at Y, and halfway through the year you've got to freeze your costs because you've had a number of kids come in. Not their fault. Every child in Connecticut is entitled to a free and adequate constitutionally guaranteed public education. But that's another way to do this as well. But so definitely consolidation at the smaller school district level is needed in this state. And frankly, that will lead to cost savings and efficiencies that we all can benefit from. And then special ed is the other area where I would say we can consolidate services. We've already done a great job. You should be very, very proud of this town. The school district here has been a leader on this for years. We took the Alice Peck School, could have mothballed it, turned it into a dedicated special education center where we have a centralized location for all our kids who need those services, and we can even, and the state, get this, the state loved that program so much. We put in a bonding request for $2.5 million for Alice Peck to help do some improvements there. They loved the program there so much that they added another 4 to it. I've never heard of that happening, them saying, we like their program so much, here's some more money. So Hamden's been a leader on that, and it can be a leader for other towns going forward.
Thank you. Do you have opinion on that, Senator Logan?
Yes, in one of the tables I had a discussion on this very topic. So when it comes to education funding and talk of consolidation or regionalization, I'm certainly in favor of that. We have about 169 municipalities, something like 150 or 151 different school boards out of that. And I do agree that consolidation should be warranted. However, I am not in favor of the state mandating to municipalities how to consolidate or how to regionalize. I think the state should incentivize towns to consolidate. For example, you look at the Amity school system. We already have some of that going on, right? Bethany, Woodbridge, Orange, they've got that Amity school system going. Ansonia and Derby, they have agreed to work together to see where consolidating some of the common services would make sense as far as with the education system. I do believe that the state should incentivize communities to consolidate and look at regionalization. But when you look at Connecticut, geographically speaking, we're just such a diverse and just there's no cookie cutter way of doing this here in Connecticut. And how does the state incentivize communities to consider consolidation? Well, we are a state of limited resources, and those communities that do consolidate their services, they'll be eligible for more state funding than those that do not. But I do not believe in mandating communities. You know, it always sounds good when, you know, we'll tell other people what to do, but when the reverse starts happening to us, no one likes that. So here as a state, we need to look at a statewide basis. We need to do something about it, but mandating it from Hartford to our communities, in my opinion, is not the best way to go.
Thank you. Senator Looney, do you have an opinion?
Yes, thank you. I certainly agree with Representative D'Agostino that one of the everything that he said, he certainly looked at this comprehensively, both from the point of view of a Board of Ed member when he served now in the legislature. The thing to keep in mind, as he pointed out, is that we have really an inefficient system with far too many school districts in the state for our population. Many of the small town school districts are actually losing student population, and yet they're looking to maintain the same grant level that they've always had, even with a smaller population, which really is an inefficient way for the state to allocate its resources. So we need to have more regional school districts for purposes of efficiency. We have so many small single-town school districts where you have a couple of schools losing population. You have the in-school administrative staff, and then on top of that, you have the central office education bureaucracy supervising only a couple of schools in a small-town, single-town district. It really is inefficient. So what we need to look at is the one successful model for regionalism that we have in this state is the consolidation of the probate court system, which happened in 2010 when we reduced 117 different probate districts down to 54, which is the current level. That greatly enhanced the professionalism of the probate court system. Many small towns, the probate courts were only open half a day, twice a week or something like that. Now we have full-time operation in all of those. And the guiding principle in that coordination was that communities with populations under 40,000 should be expected to assume or expect that they're going to be part of a regional district rather than a single town district. That worked very well with the probate plan that was adopted. And of course, any education consolidation is probably the most politically sensitive thing you can do. But the probate system was equally controversial in that you were actually abolishing elective offices and in effect removing the office of elected probate judge in many cases to reduce that number from 117 to 54. So it is possible where there is a will to do this with good planning, and we have done it once, and we need to find ways to do it again regarding schools.
Representative Porter.
Wow, a lot has been said. I definitely support, most of what's been said. I don't agree with incentivizing. When I hear that word, it kind of sounds like, being bought. I don't think that people need to be incentivized to do what's right, to do what's equitable, to do what's reasonable. And sometimes, unfortunately, we need to be told what to do. Because if we sit around and wait on folks to do what's right, I think we're getting, we have a product of it right now in the state, and what we're looking at as far as our revenues and our budget and this red hole that we keep falling deeper and deeper into. Sometimes, people don't like mandates. It's like a dirty word to some folks, but to me, I think sometimes you do need to be told what to do. And unfortunately, public education is predicated on zip code, and that's been my experience in this state. I live in New Haven. I've been here for 18 years. I had a son graduate from Wilbur Cross High School, and I had a daughter that went to elementary and middle school in Wallingford through the ACES program. And the education that she received versus the education that my son received was tremendously different. And I can remember when we went to visit the school, when she first started out in Wallingford, and my son went with us. He was in middle school. And he was like, wow. He was fanning the books. And I was like, what are you doing? He was like, new book smell. They didn't even have new books in his school, and we laugh, but it's really unfortunate, the disparities that we see in education. And I will push back on the term achievement gap, because I don't like the connotation of that. These children are fully capable of achieving. It's not an achievement gap, it's an opportunity and resource gap. And when we level the playing field, we will get the same results in New Haven and in Bridgeport and Hartford that we get in Wallingford and, all the other towns, Milford, that are doing well according to, what's on the books. So
Thank you.
I support all of those things that were said by both of my colleagues on my side of the aisle.
Thank you. Plastic bags. What are the prospects for a statewide ban on single-use plastic bags? Let us start with Senator Looney.
I think support for that is growing. It was initially introduced a couple of years ago by Senator Ted Kennedy, then chair of the Environment Committee. We know a number of municipalities have already adopted it. We do need to find ways to reduce the number of plastics going into our waste stream. Obviously, it is something that I would support. Plus trying to find ways to reduce or get rid of the number of styrofoam cups and plastic straws and all of those other things that increasingly create problems in our waste stream.
Mr. D'Agostino.
Once again, Hamden helping lead the way, right? The town council just this week had a debate on implementing that locally, and I think they're probably going to be moving forward with that. I agree. I'm pretty hopeful on the state level. I think the other factor to mention is that you're starting to see companies actually moving that way as well. And so when you've got private industry and the public moving in the same direction, I think it's likely to happen.
Okay. Representative Porter, it sounds like there's no discussion of statewide ban on single-use plastic bags. Is there?
Is there a statewide discussion?
Yeah, the question was about statewide ban, but I'm hearing that municipalities are handling this.
There is a bill.
Yes, I'm being told that environment has a bill in. I don't sit on that committee, but I do know of the discussions going on, and I do support it. I think any measure that we can take to eliminate waste and the kind of problems that plastic causes to the environment should be taken seriously.
Senator Looney. Oh, no. Whom do they leave out here?
Logan.
Oh, Senator Logan. Sorry. Here you are.
That's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I certainly believe that feel that the state should work towards a ban of plastic bags. I don't know if we can go there in one step or in one shot, but absolutely, we need to consider the environment, and plastic bags are definitely a problem, particularly when you look at our Long Island Sound. So I think it's a great initiative, a great proposal in terms of working towards eliminating plastic bags in Connecticut. The question is, how do we go about getting there? And there are a number of different proposals that have been out there in terms of how to do that. Some of them have implications in our urban areas, those with less economic disposable income. For example, one option is to charge folks for plastic bags. That's been out there as well, which could disproportionately affect certain lower income folks. So I'm certainly in favor of looking at it. It's something that we need to continue to focus on, and I'm absolutely all in working towards eliminating the use of plastic bags in Connecticut.
Thank you. Connecticut has created a new union for employees providing care to the elderly. 2 questions. What steps have been taken to ensure that adequate supervision is received by the caregivers? And 2, who do the elderly contact for timely assistance if they have problems with their caregivers? Who would like to start
I'll take it.
that discussion?
It's not a new union. So last year, what we did was we restructured the pay scale and the requirements for the existing caregivers in the state of Connecticut who provide in-home care. There's obviously a whole private industry that deals with this, but there are other groups that work through state of Connecticut agencies and are funded principally through Medicaid, and therefore the state negotiates a contract for those workers. And what we were able to do last year was to really kind of provide them an increase in wages that they had not had in, I want to say, at least 10 or 12 years. So the idea is to attract, obviously, more qualified individuals to those roles, but also provide for workers' compensation. So when they get hurt on the job, for example, and other benefits, again, to sort of stabilize that field, which, of course, increases the quality of care. Particularly with in-home care, you want more static employment. You don't want different employees coming in at different times, and that's really what a number of the people who were consuming those services were experiencing. So that was the work we did on what was called the PCA, Personal Care Assistant contract, last year. So it's an existing structure that exists, and we really kind of modernized it, increased their wages, increased the coverage that they have. Separately from that, that entire structure is governed through the State Department of Administrative Services, and there are state oversight contractors who place those individuals. And so there's always and should always be a communication mechanism for seniors, for example, who take advantage of those services to contact through. And if there isn't, then something is wrong. If somebody has a particular experience, I'd like to hear more about it. But the way we've structured this through that contract is meant to actually deal with exactly that. And there should always be
supervision. You're talking
absolutely.
about supervision.
Yeah. And by having that contract and that oversight, there is more supervision, there is more professionalism, and most importantly, there's more stability in those services that are provided.
Does anybody else wish to talk about this?
Just briefly, enhancing the quality of home care in this way, as I think we have done through the professional, through the PCA agreement and all that, means, as Representative D'Agostino said, that salaries will be better, there'll be more stability, less turnover. One of the things that's most disruptive to an elderly person is having a turnover in the staff coming into the home to take care of them, losing a trusted caregiver, having to start in with someone else. There'll be less of that, I think, under a system where it's more professionalized. And ultimately, there is much much greater saving to the state of Connecticut. The longer people can be sustained living independently in their own homes with some assistance and not having to go into a nursing home is both less expensive for the state, less expensive for the state's Medicaid program, but also better for the individual because people are happier in their own homes. And as long as they are there with whatever assistance they need, their quality of life is so much better than if they have to be placed in a nursing home in an alien setting.
And I'll just speak to the worker piece of it. You know, it's important that people get paid, you know, and that they're able to maintain dignity in the work they do. And that, I mean, to me, is some of the most important work or job that a person can have, taking care of our seniors. You know, they've taken care of us our entire life. So I see it as an investment, not only in the care and the accountability and you know, retention and all that stuff, but also just taking pride in the work and letting people know that we appreciate them for what they do and that what they're doing is worth something. And it was important that we get that done, you know, increasing the wages, making sure that they're taken care of with workman's comp, because this is heavy duty work. It's very laborious, you know, and some of the seniors are mobile. A lot goes into the care. So I fully support it, and I'm looking at ways to possibly expand it and support it even more, because that's just how important these jobs are in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. Senator Logan, do you wish to express an opinion?
Yeah, just to keep it brief. I mean, last session, I, along with my colleagues, supported increasing wages for some of our home care workers, and actually making them more eligible for workers' compensation as well. I do think it's important. It's important that we focus on our seniors, focus on services to our seniors, particularly that are living at home. I also am in favor of looking at public-private partnerships to get it done and maintain the high quality care that they deserve as well. And there's a number of organizations within our community. One of them comes to mind is Marrakesh, for example, that does a good job on that as well. And I think it's something that I will continue to focus on as well, moving forward.
Thank you. The recent release of the National Climate Assessment reveals the economic and health toll of climate change. What environmental actions do you feel that Connecticut must take to ensure that our state does not lose land to rising seas, protects healthy trees that absorb carbon dioxide, and protects critical watersheds that provide us with clean water? Also, what is the fate of Sleeping Giant Park, and when is it planned to be opened? And it doesn't say to what, but I'm guessing to development. So, who would like to start? What? Oh, much better, much better. Oh, phew. Oh, all right. No, it is when planned to be open to the public so we can go and walk there again. Yay! Okay. So that one is taken care of. Thank you. So,
Can I take the tree piece?
what?
Can I take the part of that on trees?
Yes, go ahead.
The whole thing, Mike, take the whole thing.
Most people I think in this room know this has been just an issue of mine since I got up at the legislature, which started when I walked out of my house and saw a UI contractor starting to cut down a tree without having asked me, and I'm thinking, why is he doing that? And then they told me, oh, if you don't agree to it, they'll charge you if it comes down and damages a wire. I'm like, well, that's not right. So Hamden, once again, a couple of years ago, we had the PURA down here, and led to a change in how the notification requirements go with respect to the utility work that they do. We've got a new bill in this year to sort of sharpen those requirements as well, the notice requirements, making sure it's absolutely clear that they get your sign off before they do work on any tree on or adjacent to your property. So that's in the work, and I'd ask you to support, to send an email to the Environment Committee supporting House Bill 5312. It's on your table. And the second piece, obviously, is if you're driving on the Merritt and you're driving on 91 and you see the work that they do and the clear cutting, and that is all DOT. And I've been trying to get a bill passed for years now that requires, because DOT is a bunch of, God bless them, but they're road engineers. And all they have is a requirement of 30 feet either way, no matter what the grade, no matter the quality of the tree. to
my
get them to run those, before they do any work, run that by the Department of Environmental Protection, who's got arborists on staff. What is your plan? Do you need to go 30 feet back here versus 15 feet here? Should be working on, for example, obviously the dead, dying, and damaged trees first, and not just clear-cutting healthy trees. And then when you do the work there, let's not leave piles of sawdust that crush the existing and vegetation that's left, so that we're left with standing pools of water, which obviously pose their own kinds of health risks, both from an erosion standpoint and mosquitoes, etc. So requiring DOT just to think about the work they do before they actually do it, that's a separate bill. That's HB 5308. That I'd ask people to support as well. I sent out an email on this. Just send emails to the Environment Committee, ask them to get a public hearing on these bills, and hopefully we can move them forward, because there's folks here who know, obviously, the importance of the tree canopy for our environment in Connecticut.
Senator Logan.
Remind me of the question again?
The question is, the recent release of the National Climate Assessment reveals the economic and health toll of climate change. What environmental actions do you feel Connecticut must take to ensure that our state does not lose land to rising seas, protects healthy trees that absorb carbon dioxide, and protects critical watersheds that provide us with clean water?
Right, so I think this is a team effort from our community. I, for one, certainly try to walk the walk and talk the talk in terms of, I'm on the board of directors for the Housatonic Valley Association, vice chair of that. And we do a lot in terms of trying to make sure that awareness is a big part of it. I think that legislators should always consider the environment in any bill that we pass, because oftentimes you find someone will pass a law or pass a bill, and it'll have an unintended effect on the environment. But if we think about the environment for every single action that we take, that will take that off the table, and it would avoid lots of different mistakes that we have made throughout time. So the environment is very important. I think that we should remain focused on that. I think there's a lot of education that needs to go on out there to legislators and to the public. I think the more that is known out there about the environment, the importance of the environment, not just to the ecology of our state of Connecticut, but actually to the economic health of Connecticut and to commerce all the way down the line. It is all intertwined, and we should remain focused on that.
Senator Looney.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to just comment on one other aspect, which is our commitment, which we have to maintain and sustain to use of renewable energy. That I think is going to be important. We have a statewide plan on that to increase our use of renewables and to meet certain benchmarks going forward. And I think we need to make sure that we are consistent with that, because that is going to be critically important for us. And also regarding sleeping giant, obviously, I wish that Representative Elliott were here, because he actually suffered severe damage in the same. His house was damaged in the same storm that caused the damage to by the tornadoes that caused the damage to sleeping giant. So I know the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection has been working hard to try to restore that. I don't know if they have yet set a date by which the park will be fully ready for the use by the public once again. I don't think they have. They first of all have to make it safe by removing all of the damaged trees that would not be, make sure there's not a danger to people using the park for recreation purposes. I know they're aware that it's that's certainly a significant regional resource and are hoping to get it ready as soon as possible, but I don't think they have actually set a targeted date yet by which it will be.
Thank you. Representative Porter.
Yes, they have not come up with a date to reopen Sleeping Giant yet, unfortunately, but I think fortunately, as Senator Looney just said, the importance of that is making sure that the park is secured and safe for when people do start to revisit. Climate change, economic and health challenges. I think the first thing we need to do is admit there is such a thing as climate change. And that does come through what Senator Logan said, education. So legislators and our constituents and the state as a whole need to be educated around that, and I will admit I need to be educated more around that. But I think that there are a lot of people that are already educated on this issue, and we need to seek that advice and hear what they're saying about ways to effectively and efficiently address these issues so that we're not putting people at jeopardy. Because for me, when you say economic, that is important, but health is also. There's no economy without healthy people.
Thank you. And a few short ones before we end our wonderful gathering. Do you consider our public water supply to be a public trust? Why? Anybody want to start?
I will briefly. Yes, I certainly do. I support that language in the state water plan. I believe that it should be specifically designated as a public trust. That language needs to be included. I hope that that the state water plan will be adopted, approved with that language.
What does it mean? What does it mean? Educate us about what it means.
Well, it means basically that there is clearly a public interest in the water supply, that it is something that is in the nature almost analogous to a utility, that it is something that is a fundamentally broad concern to the entire public, and not to in other words, the general interest of the public should take precedence over the interest of any private parties involved.
Thank you. Anybody else want to say something to this effect?
I absolutely support it.
Senator Logan?
So just for full disclosure, I'm not a career politician. In my day job, I'm an engineer at a water company, Aquarian Water Company. It has many acres of watershed land. And so, part of the issue is the balance, right, of the needs of the needs of our water for human consumption and for the environment. And that's it's a tough balance to have. We started on a state water plan in Denver, where we included stakeholders throughout the Connecticut, whether it's land trusts, water utilities, government, users, customers, to take a look at this very important natural resource. So we spent a number of years putting together the state water plan that was agreed upon and negotiated. And the issue with waters and public trust is more of a legal issue than anything. And the issue that came up with that language was that there was a state water plan, a very comprehensive plan that was put together and agreed upon by all the stakeholders. And it was submitted, and then there was an added executive summary of that state water plan that included a bunch of language about lands in the public trust that gave a number of the stakeholders some pause because of what the implication of that language is. So I was of the opinion that as part of the state water plan, looking at waters and public trust was one of the items to be looked at in more detail, with like a public hearing with forums, with similar to what the other aspects of the state water plan went through. And so that's where some of the issue is in terms of the lands and public trust. It has legal implication. What does the implications mean? It means that it could be utilized by different groups to usurp or work around existing regulations and laws that are on the books that help particularly water utilities or water providers provide drinking water for our community. So I think it's something that needs to be looked at in more detail. I'm of the opinion that it deserves more discussion before it's implemented as part of the state water plan as it's been submitted in the executive summary of the state water plan. But it's not a bad or negative cause. I just think it needs more discussion because the implications are great, and it's outside of what was agreed upon and thoroughly vetted and discussed as part of the state water plan.
I'm not sure what I can add. I confess,
Okay.
I thought the public interest was considered when we used our watershed. So I'll have to read the plan. I certainly would want the public interest taken into account when we're deciding what to do with our water resources. I wouldn't want. At the end of the day, I want people to have potable drinking water, so wherever they are. So I wouldn't want anything to impede that, but certainly I want the public interest considered.
Okay.
I agree with Representative D'Agostino. As far as stakeholders, I want to make sure that those are the people closest to the problem, because I believe they're closest to the solution. So if we're talking stakeholders, let's make sure that what their vested interest is.
Okay. I thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with us here. Thank you very much for being that. And the League will see you next year in January at the breakfast with the legislators. Thank you.
Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.